A rain-slicked highway at midnight is no place for a motorcycle, yet Chandrakant and Amit are pushing their engine to the limit. They aren't fleeing a crime or racing for a prize. They are risking their lives to meet a rigid 9 a.m. corporate deadline. At 8:30 p.m. in the town of Jaipur, Odisha, Amit receives a call from his superior. There is an error in an accounts report that must be fixed and hand-delivered by morning. For Amit, the choice feels binary: brave the night or face the unemployment line. Their return to Reachout covers 220 kilometers, snaking through Narangpur and Bhawani Patna into the isolated Rampur forest. Here, the grid goes black. There are no safe havens, alternate routes, or emergency services for dozens of miles. The pressure of modern work often demands that we ignore our most basic survival instincts. Amit and Chandrakant choose to suppress their fear of the dark and cross the threshold into the forest. Their first warning comes at a roadside diner outside Jaipur. A veteran truck driver, a man who spends his life on these roads, listens to their plan and immediately refuses to move his own rig until sunrise. He begs the boys to wait until 6 a.m. The driver offers no specific details about what haunts the road, relying on the weight of his own refusal to convey the danger. He treats the forest as a space that simply does not belong to the living after dark. Pushing on to Bhawani Patna, they are intercepted by a night patrol van. Officers emerge with flashlights, shouting questions into the dark. The moment the officers hear the name Reachout, the aggression vanishes. They realize these bikers intend to cut through the forest. The senior inspector climbs out of the van, his expression shifting from authority to stunned resignation. The police stop acting as peacekeepers and start behaving like archivists. They meticulously photograph the boys' faces, their ID cards, and their motorcycle, effectively gathering the forensic evidence required for a missing persons file. At 2 a.m., they reach the town of Narla. 25 armed officers block the road, warning of local murderers and strange things ahead. They advise the boys to stay put, but the corporate deadline at 9 a.m. feels more immediate than a vague threat in the trees. They push past the final blockade and enter the Rampur forest. Almost instantly, the sky opens up. A freezing, torrential rain drapes the road in a thick curtain of water. For 6 miles, Chandrakant fights the handlebars in the downpour. Behind him, Amit is a heavy, shivering weight, clinging tightly to Chandrakant's back as the cold seeps into their bones. Chandrakant eventually finds a cattle shelter to hide from the storm. He kills the engine and turns to check on his friend, expecting to find him shivering and soaked through. Chandrakant's own jacket is heavy with water, but Amit is standing there bone dry. Despite 6 miles of riding through a vertical wall of rain, not a single drop of water has touched his clothes. 3 kilometers later, they are stopped by a group of villagers patrolling the road. When one asks why Chandrakant is riding alone, Chandrakant gestures to the pillion seat behind him. He turns around to find the seat empty. Amit is gone. Moments later, an SUV pulls up and the real Amit steps out. He reveals that he was left behind at the Narla police checkpoint over an hour ago. He never made it onto the motorcycle. The realization is sickening. Chandrakant had been carrying something on his back for miles, something that felt like Amit, but stayed dry in a storm. Terrified and reunited, the two friends get back on the bike and flee deeper into the trees. On a steep uphill climb, the motorcycle suddenly dies. As they try to push the bike to the crest, Chandrakant feels an immense, dragging weight pulling them backward. The motorcycle feels 3 times its normal mass, as if invisible hands are gripping the frame. The struggle for momentum becomes a battle for survival. Every foot of progress is a fight against a force that seems determined to keep the motorcycle pinned to that specific dark slope. A woman emerges from the fog ahead. She wears a white sari, her face obscured by long white hair, and she is dragging a heavy burlap sack across the road. She sits in the middle of the road and begins a horrific ritual. She pulls a child's skeleton from the sack, applies turmeric to the bone, and drapes a garland of flowers over the remains. The boys are forced into a role of passive witnesses. They sit on the bike, unable to move, listening to the entity wail over the skeleton for 20 minutes. tree at the forest's edge. The horror of the Rampor forest is its ability to command the attention of the living. It traps passers-by in a static loop, forcing them to participate in a traumatic memory they cannot influence or escape. Exhausted and trembling, the boys finally reach the forest's exit as the sun begins to rise. They encounter an elderly local man and tell him what they witnessed in the dark. The man explains the history of the curve. Years ago, a husband and his 7-month-old daughter were killed there in a violent collision. The mother survived the crash, but was broken by the loss. She sat with the bodies on the asphalt, performing a final ritual for her child, before hanging herself from the tree by the road. This is a trauma loop, a localized phenomenon where a spirit endlessly reenacts the moments of its greatest despair. Travelers who cross the threshold at night find themselves pulled into the orbit of this grief. When the experienced truckers and the police warn you that a road belongs to the dead, they are setting a boundary. No corporate deadline is worth the risk of being pulled into a cycle of sorrow that never ends.